Why not?
What's the address of your emergency?
5210 North Division. We're headed on Kimberly and Division. We're chasing my kid's dad's vehicle. My kid's dad is missing. His vehicle, it has two people in it. It's a black and white Dodge Nitro.
Okay, quit chasing, okay?
Okay, well, they're...
Okay.
Okay. Quit chasing.
Okay. So, repeat the location where you're at.
They just, 42nd Street and Division.
Okay. What direction did the vehicle leave?
They turned down 42nd Street into the neighborhood.
Okay, just a moment here. Where are you going to meet officers?
I'm at Quick Star on Division and Kimberly.
Hi, kid.
Okay. All right, just a moment here, okay? All right, what is the phone number you're calling from?
Okay.
269-357-5076. Search here. The officer coming here. He said quit following them.
And what kind of vehicle are you in? What kind of vehicle are you in?
I'm in a Xterra, Nissan Xterra, sorry.
Okay, what color?
It's gray.
Okay. Now, tell me exactly what happened.
My kid's dad, I've been trying to get a hold of him all day long today. He's been missing.
He's down here.
Hold on.
Whoever's with
Stop chasing him, he said.
tell them to stop chasing him. I need to get information so we can send you an officer so nobody gets hurt.
My kid's dad, stop chasing him, she said. She needs to stay with the officer.
Yeah.
You need to stop.
Tell them just wait at Quick Star. I have officers dispatched. If you're not there, you're not going to get help, period.
Okay, you need to go to Quick Star to talk to the officers, or we're not going to get help. My kid's dad has not been answering this phone all day today. I've been trying to reach him. I've been trying to get into contact with his roommate, and she keeps beating around the bush. His girlfriend said she hasn't seen him since 4 o'clock this morning. Nobody's talked to him. He had my son's car. My son's car is missing now. It's not in his driveway anymore. And go back to Quick Star.
I will.
And
where is he missing from?
Here in Davenport, Iowa, his house on 53rd and Division.
Okay, is that the 5210 address that you gave me?
Yes.
What's his name?
Brian Goodwin.
Okay. And you said that his vehicle is a Dodge Nitro?
Yes.
In Brian's car, and you're advising it had 2 occupants and neither one was Brian?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So somebody had answered his phone, I guess, and I guess some black guy had answered his phone and said that they got the phone because somebody had borrowed their vehicle and left the phone in the vehicle or some shit, which is a complete lie.
Who called the phone? Who spoke to this person?
His friend Vicky.
Okay. Okay. How long ago was that?
How long ago was that? The day that you talked to? How long ago did you talk to this black guy?
Probably about 2 hours ago.
Probably about 2 hours ago. T. I don't know exactly what her last name is.
Is the first name's Audie?
Yeah.
All right, what is your first and last name?
Amber Lamar.
Okay, and Amber, okay, I'm just checking, and so is this normal for him to go and nobody be able to reach him, or?
No.
Okay.
No, anytime I call him, he calls me back within a few hours at the longest, and I've been calling him since 9 o'clock this morning.
Okay. All right, and did his girlfriend seem to be concerned with him not answering?
His girlfriend has been concerned the last couple of days, but now all of a sudden today she's like not concerned at all.
When is the last time anybody spoke to him?
4 o'clock this morning.
Okay, and
And
what was
that was his girlfriend, supposedly, talked to him.
what's his girlfriend's name?
Tori Sneaton.
Okay, Tori, and what Tori's last name again?
Sneaton.
I'm sorry, is it Negan?
Sneaton, like Smeaton.
Okay. All right, looks like we got an officer that's in that area. There.
Yeah, we're on our way back.
Okay.
To Wichita right now. I'm sorry, I don't have control over. I'm just a passenger.
I understand. Well, we have an officer that's arriving there, so if you guys aren't the officers,
We're on Kimberly and Welcome Way right now, on our way back.
you're clear over at Kimberly and Welcome Way?
Yeah, we can go to this quick start here. If they can just come down to this quick start, I don't know what else
Let
to
me
do.
my dispatcher.
I tried. Okay.
Okay, just one moment here. Natalie, dispatching. My caller is clear for a Welcome Way. Do you want her to go to the Main Street or have her continue to Division? We're at Quick Start Division right now. Actually, it's over there. Okay, I'll just have her keep going there. Just continue to the Quick Start there at Division and Kimberly.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Kimberly.
The officers are already there waiting.
Okay.
So follow the rules of the road. Stay safe, okay?
Yeah. Yes.
And go there. Even if you see the vehicle, continue to the quick start and run on back. All right?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Are you aware, Ms. Goochfield, of whether police were dispatched and did meet with Amber LaBarge?
Yes, they were dispatched and met with her at the gas station.
And that would have been around midnight on going into January 16th,
Yes,
approximately 4 hours before that fire call that we talked about earlier.
yes,
Okay. And that quick start at Division in Kimberly is a few blocks south of 5210 North Division?
yes.
Does the Scott Emergency Communication Center have the ability to ping a phone?
Under certain circumstances, yes, we can.
What does it mean to ping a phone?
We contact the cell phone provider of that phone or the phone carrier, and they will try to get an approximate last used location. So we will get coordinates from the cell phone provider. We have to submit a form and sign it. Sometimes it's an actual subpoena type form that we have to do, but they will send us the lat long of the last known location when the phone was used.
And that means latitude and longitude?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, latitude and longitude.
Basically coordinates of where that phone is.
Yes.
What are the circumstances that allow you to do that? Can you just do that whenever you're trying to find someone?
No, we cannot. essentially the person's phone that we are pinging, they have to be a threat to the public or themselves, or they are in danger, is usually our criteria that we're looking for.
At any point on January 16th, was the Scott Emergency Communications Center asked to ping a phone?
Yes, they were asked by, I believe it was the Davenport Police Department that asked us to do it. The dispatchers didn't initiate it.
Are you aware of what phone the psych was asked to ping?
Yes, I'm aware of a phone number.
And what was that phone number?
331-643-0539.
And do you know who that was associated with?
Adriana, we had Prieto, I might have said that wrong, for her name.
Are you aware of a ping for Brian Goodwin's phone?
This is the only ping that I have notated. It could have been done. Davenport Police has the authorization to do this as well. These are just what dispatch did.
Give me just one moment.
Sorry, we did do a ping on a different phone number too.
Okay, so you've reviewed your records there in front of you? And you found that.
Yes, yep.
What was that other phone number?
563-579-6818.
And do you know who that's associated with?
I believe it's Brian's. It's not certain in our notes.
That'd be Brian Goodwin.
Yes.
Okay, and what time was that requested?
7:39 a.m. on the 16th.
And are you aware of whether any data was found locating where that phone was?
There was no data provided to us that showed that the phone was off.
And obviously this is about 3.5 hours after the fire call, is that right?
Yes.
And when you say there's no data, it's saying that phone is not pinging anywhere actively?
Correct. They stated to us that it was showing the phone was turned off and there was no latitude, longitude to be able to be provided to us.
Thank you, I don't have any further questions.
Cross-examination? Ms. Keith?
No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down. The state calls the next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Detective Eric Robinson to the stand.
You raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you will give in this matter will be the complete truth? If so, say I do. I do. Thank you. Have a seat, please.
Please state your name for the record.
Eric Robinson,
Spell your first name.
A-R-I-C.
What is your occupation?
I'm a detective with the Davenport Police Department.
How long have you been employed at the Davenport Police Department?
For 23 and a half years.
Describe your educational background.
So I attended college, but prior to graduating, I was hired by the police department. After I was hired, I went to the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy where I graduated from there and then completed a field training program and began my career.
Okay, and define for the jury what a field training program consists of.
It's just a step-by-step process where you learn the ins and outs of the job, really. And then you move through different phases, for lack of better terms, graduate from one phase to another. And you'll do a solo phase at the end where you'll eventually do everything on your own. And then you'll pass or fail that. There'll be some remedial training if you need it, but once you pass, you're on your own.
Through that field training program, are you supervised by a senior officer?
Yes.
All right. Detective Robinson, describe for the jury the different capacities that you've served the Davenport Police Department throughout the course of your 23-year career.
Sure. So everyone begins in the patrol division, and to move different. Began there, worked all 3 shifts for 10 years. After my 10 years there, was assigned to the NETS unit, which is a specialized unit that works in higher crime rental areas throughout the city, focusing more on a community policing approach. And after 2 years of that, I was moved over to the Detective Bureau. And I've been working as a detective for the last 13 and a half years.
Within the Detective Bureau of the Davenport Police Department, is it divided into different units?
It is.
Could you describe?
Sure. So there's a regular criminal investigation division, and there's also what I refer to on the other side of the wall, our Tactical Operations Bureau, or TOB. So our TOB houses our gun investigations unit, and then our vice and narcotics unit. And then on my side of the wall, the more traditional Detective Bureau houses property crimes, our special victims unit, in addition to our major case unit. And I'm a detective in our major case unit.
Okay. What is the function of the Special Victims Unit?
So they deal with both adult and child sex abuse cases. It's a pretty difficult job. In addition to that, we do investigate child abuse and child pornography charges as well.
And what is the focus of the Major Case Unit?
That is crimes involving persons. So you're dealing with everything from harassments to assaults, robberies, all the way up to homicides.
Were you working in your capacity as a detective with the Major Case Unit on or about January 16th of 2024?
Yes.
All right. What is your normally scheduled shift throughout the course of the week, running Monday through Friday?
My normal hours are 7:30 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday.
And is that true for all of the detectives within the Detective Bureau?
No, a majority of them work 8 to 4.
Sure. Outside of those hours then, describe what procedure is set up if there is a major case event that requires a call-in of detectives.
Sure, so we have a yearly on-call calendar, which encompasses all of our detectives. So there'll be 2-column list that includes supervisors, which is our sergeants and our corporals. And then another side of the list is our detectives, such as myself. And like I mentioned, that's a year-long list where you take on-call at a week at a time. And during the event of a major incident, our supervisors who are on call will receive a call from the shift supervisor, and they'll make the necessary call-outs depending on the nature of the incident.
Okay. During the early morning hours of January 16th, of 2024, after 3:57 a.m., was there a major event that occurred here within Davenport that resulted in a call out of detectives before their regularly scheduled shifts?
Yes, ma'am.
Describe.
So at around 3:57 a.m. in the morning on January 16th of 2024, we received a 911 call in reference to a residence being on fire. And during the course of the fire department putting out that fire, they discovered 2 bodies inside, and their deaths were deemed to be suspicious in nature.
What was the address of the fire?
5210 North Division Street.
At some point in time, were the bodies, the deceased bodies inside of 5210 North Division Street identified?
They were.
Who were those individuals identified as?
One female victim was identified as Amy Smith, and another male was identified as Brian Goodwin.
And what was it about the condition of the bodies that was deemed to be a suspicious death when those bodies were identified?
So Amy was found to have a suspected gunshot wound to her head, and Brian was found to have a suspected gunshot wound to her head in addition to his upper torso or chest area.
Okay. With the gunshot wounds to both Amy Smith and Brian Goodwin then, did it convert it from a routine fire call to a major case investigation?
It did.
Okay, and then essentially then, what would have been the scope of the investigation that ensued from that point moving forward?
It would have been a homicide investigation.
Okay. In the context of that, the fire call, was that also converted from a routine fire call to an arson call as well?
Yes, it was.
All right. Now, Detective Robinson, what was your role in this investigation?
So I was assigned as the lead detective for this case. Myself, along with Brandon Askew, were both assigned as lead detectives for this particular incident.
Okay. And can you describe for the jury, when you have a major case investigation, are there a number of law enforcement assets that are allocated to this type of investigation?
Yes, it's very typical for essentially everyone to come in. If you're available, especially for an incident of this size, you're coming in.
Okay. With the timing of the event, who would have been working the on-call duty during the early morning hours of January 16th?
I think the supervisor who was on call was Dan Reeves.
All right. And so how were you notified of the incident that had developed at 5210 North Division Street?
I don't know specifically how I was notified, but it would have been a phone call.
Sure.
I don't specifically remember who it would have called me. More than likely, it would have been my supervisor at the time that made a call directly to my cell phone at my personal residence.
Okay. When that notification was received by members of the Detective Bureau, describe then procedurally what will develop.
So I would be given general instructions on where they would like me to go, and I was directed to respond to the station because there was a large contingent of people that was being brought down that needed to be interviewed. In addition to that, there's other things that are being done, such as search warrants being applied for, things of that nature that it really is important for someone to be at the station.
Okay. Were there law enforcement assets that were assigned to go to the crime scene?
Yes, there were.
Can you describe what happens at a crime scene when we have a major case event like this?
So we'll establish a crime scene, both a primary, secondary crime scene typically. And then within that primary crime scene, which is sealed off with crime scene tape, the yellow crime scene tape that I'm sure everyone has seen, we'll start a crime scene log, which we can keep track of people coming in and out of. We will station a uniformed police officer to keep track of that log, in addition to other assets if needed, to keep people out of that crime scene, to keep it as pristine as humanly possible.
And why is it that you want to establish a perimeter around a crime scene to prevent people from coming into and potentially taking that crime scene other than law enforcement personnel?
Just protect the integrity of the scene. This particular crime scene was pretty ravaged by the extinguishing efforts that were put forth by the fire department. So we do that. Main purpose is to preserve the integrity of it as best as we can.
As law enforcement officers are coming to that crime scene and enter that crime scene, what is then documented in that crime scene log?
Will be the time they entered the crime scene, and then the time they exit the crime scene.
And as an officer enters that crime scene, what types of functions are they performing?
It could be any number of things. There'll be, in addition to officers and detectives, there'll be crime scene technicians that'll be photographing. Sometimes there'll be other officers involved that would be using 3D scans of the crime scene. And then you're there, there'll be detectives there that will generally direct our technicians one way or the other on what they feel is important to collect and or swab for potential DNA or other trace evidence.
Okay. Define what a crime scene technician is.
So everyone's seen CSI, I'm sure. It's nothing like it is on TV, but it's essentially the men and women who come in, they'll document the crime scene via photographs. They also have training on our 3D scans, and they will collect evidence for us as well, as long as it's not drug related. That has to be turned over to officers, sworn law enforcement. And then they'll swab evidence as well and process different scenes for us.
In situations where there are swabs being taken, define for the jury what the purpose of a swab is and what types of evidence is being collected or attempted to be collected by those swabs.
So you can swap pretty much anything. I think a lot of people think of blood. When we swab, we'll swab some blood. That'll be primarily for DNA purposes. But we also swab for epithelial or touch DNA. We do it quite a bit when we process vehicles. We'll swab door handles, steering wheels, gear shifts, things of that nature, because there is a pretty good probability of us getting some sort of touch DNA from that.
And in the event that there are drugs found at a particular crime scene, who would be responsible then for taking control of those items or narcotics and maintaining the chain of custody for those items?
That could be any sworn law enforcement officer.
All right. How would you describe the weather conditions starting from January 14th through January 16th of 2024 here in Davenport, Iowa?
For lack of better terms, it was pretty brutal. It was below zero outside, really cold, and a lot of snow. It was pretty nasty.
Okay. With those weather conditions then, what was taken down to the crime scene and set up to help with the investigative operation?
Just for that, it's typical for any large scale crime scene that will take our crime van or crime scene van down to the scene. That can be utilized for a place north, but also a place to run logistics, if you will, from inside out.
All right. That being said, then let's step outside of that, and if we could, were you assigned to carry out tasks during the day of January 16th within the Detective Bureau?
Yes.
Okay. As far as detectives who were based out of the Detective Bureau, then what did your task primarily consist of throughout that day?
My task was primarily interviews. I spent a large portion of my day conducting multiple interviews with numerous people.
Okay. Now, Detective Robinson, are you going to be testifying multiple times throughout the course of this trial?
I will. I'll be testifying numerous times.
Explain to the jury why we are going to have you testify at varying times throughout this trial.
So we're dealing with a multiple day event that covers a lot of ground and a lot of people. So we felt that it would make a little bit more sense if we tried to present that in more of a chronological order, as opposed to just putting individuals on the stand and having them testify over, a 3, 4, or 5 day period. So I'm going to be testifying multiple different times to keep it in a chronological order as possible to assist with the understanding of everything. That's our intent anyway.
Sure. Before we talk further about various tools that were brought to the equation in the course of this investigation, have there been exhibits generated or created to give the jury a perspective of the crime scene?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, this time, may the record reflect that I'm showing the witness what's been marked as State's Exhibit 73A and also the previously introduced exhibit of 73B. May I approach the witness?
You may.
May the record reflect that I am showing counsel State's Exhibit 73A as well. All right. Now, Detective Robinson, if you could just take a moment to look at these two exhibits. Are you familiar with State's Exhibit 73A?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with State's Exhibit 73B, which has already been admitted as an item of evidence?
Yes.
All right. We have descriptors of what 73B is. For our written record, could you describe what 73A consists of?
It was just a photo snip taken from Google Maps, Google Street Maps of Casey's, which is generally across the street from 5210 North Division.
All right. And then 73B, just give us a more detailed description of what 73B is so that the jury understands where that image came from.
Again, came from Google Maps, just another street view for the front of 5210 North Division Street.
Your Honor, at this time the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit 73A.
Objection.
No objection.
73A is admitted.
May the state publish both 73A and 73B through the testimony of this witness?
You may.
Okay, Detective Robinson, I'd like for you to come down to the stand and from the stand, and let's talk about State's Exhibit 73A to begin with. And just give a perspective to the jury of the relevance of Casey's, okay? You've got the pointer there. I don't know what will work best. It may work best with you being across the way by the wall, I'm not sure, but do what works best. At any rate, please remember to project, okay?
I've never been accused of being quiet. So
That's good. All right, now as we look at 73A, where is Casey's located here in Davenport?
All would be on the southeast corner of 53rd and Division Street.
Okay. For the front of the store, what street does Casey's face?
Would face Division Street.
Okay, Division Street runs what direction?
That runs north and south.
As we look at this particular exhibit, where would Division Street be located?
Generally, in this area.
For a written record, what have you pointed to on the diagram?
To the bottom of the picture, my
Okay.
apologies. And then 53rd Street would be to the left of the picture.
Okay, what direction does 53rd Street run?
East and west.
All right, now on this particular exhibit, can we see Division Street or 53rd?
No, we cannot.
All right. Is there something that we see in the lower portion of this image that gives us a perspective of how Division Street would run north and south? And I'm talking about the sidewalk.
Okay, the sidewalk.
I just know that, just general knowledge.
Sure, all right. As we look at this image, describe for the jury what it is that they need to be familiar with relative to the property of Casey's, and just how that plays into other items of evidence that were seized.
Sure, so I think I testified that Casey's is generally across the street from 5210 Division. I say generally in the sense that it's not directly across the street. 5210 North Division is just a tad bit to the south. And the parking lot of Casey's is used frequently by some of the residents of 5210 Division to park and go back and forth from generally. You can, throughout this investigation, you see occupants of 5210 North Division also walking across the street and buying, items of food or whatnot from Casey's as well.
Where are the points of entry and exit for the Casey's business?
Would be right here, front door, and I'm pointing to the middle of the photograph.
Okay. Does the business have video surveillance cameras affixed to either the exterior or the interior of the business?
Both.
All right. On the outside of the business, were there any affixed to the front of the store?
Yes.
Did that become a source of, I guess, video footage that was very relevant to this investigation?
It did.
All right. And then inside the store, was there footage that was captured involving individuals of interest on the video surveillance cameras?
Yes.
And will that become the topic of conversation as we go through this trial?
It will.
All right. Now, I want to focus on the parking lot itself. If an individual is wanting to go to Casey's, and do some business there, how do they enter the parking lot?
There's 2 points of entry, one being off of 53rd Street and the other one being off of Division Street.
All right. Would that point of entry on Division Street, is it going to lie on the north or the south side of the property?
The south.
Okay, and for individuals associated with 5210 North Division Street, where would they tend to park if they were going to the Casey's parking lot and going back and forth between the residents?
Generally in the southernmost part of that parking lot.
Okay, now as we look at this image, does it give us an idea of what time of year this image was taken?
It does. From the Google Maps capture, it shows that it was taken in July of 2021.
Is there any type of plants or trees that we see in this image?
Yes,
Is there foliage on the trees?
absolutely.
All right. Is this image going to be distinctly different from the time frame of January 14th, 15th, and 16th of 2024?
Yes, it will be. There is nothing green showing anymore in the middle of January. All the foliage is going to be gone, and you get a pretty good view of Division Street and the residents across the street of 5210, specifically the driveway.
Okay. Take us to 73B. Now, what is depicted in the image of 73?
Front of 5210 North Division Street.
Again, when was this image taken?
Again in, oh no, I apologize. This one is in September of 2023.
Okay. Are there trees within this image associated with various structures that are located on what would be the west side of Division Street?
Yes.
Okay. During January 14th, 15th, and 16th, is it going to be completely different than what the jury's seeing as far as the full foliage on the trees?
Yes.
And just to state the obvious, how?
Well, there won't be any more leaves on the trees. It's the dead middle of winter.
Okay. All right. How many physical structures do we see in 73B?
Looks like a total of 3.
All right, starting on the left side of the diagram, if you're facing it, describe what that structure is, then go to the middle, and then go to the right, so that we understand what each of those structures is.
So on the left, I don't recall the address, but this is a duplex. I believe Hung Vo has testified that's where she lives. 5210 North Division Street would be right in the middle. And then the far right is at one point was a single family home that had been converted into a State Farm insurance agency.
Detective Robinson, describe for us how the property is set up at State Farm, focusing on the driveway and any area that members of the public would park.
So there is a driveway that accesses Division Street into the State Farm lot, and if you take this driveway to the rear or to the side of the south, to the south of State Farm, there's a small parking lot there.
If you enter into that back parking lot, what will that afford an individual a view of relative to the rear of 5210 North Division?
You would have a direct view of 5210 North Division.
All right. Describe how 5210 North Division Street was being utilized during January of 2024.
So 5210 North Division is also a single family residence that has been converted into an up and down duplex, if you will. The bottom portion is one apartment and the upper portion is another separate, completely separate apartment.
During the events of January 14th and moving forward, was anybody occupying the first floor of 5210 North Division Street?
No.
During the same period of time, who was the tenant and lessee of the lower portion of 5210 North Division?
Brian Goodwin.
Brian Goodwin. And had he been associated with this physical address for some period of time?
I believe so. I don't know the exact time frame though.
That's fine. If you could show the jury how an individual would access the lower portion of the residence.
So from the driveway, there's a small sidewalk to the south of the residence, and you take that small sidewalk to the rear, and there is a door at the back of this residence that you would have access to the downstairs basement level.
And finally, the other last general topic of conversation. Were there any video surveillance cameras affixed to either the exterior of this structure or inside?
There were, yes.
Okay, describe.
Well, I wasn't actually at this scene myself, but I've seen several photos of different video cameras that were affixed to different points of the house. I think there may even have been a couple of them on trees.
Sure.
So that's how we would know.
All right. So does this give us a real good perspective of Casey's and 5210 North Division Street?
Generally, yes.
All right. Go ahead and let's have you take your seat. Well, yeah, let's have you take your seat for the time being. Your Honor, may the record reflect that I am showing counsel what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 20. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. Detective Robinson, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 20 for purposes of identification. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 20?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize State's Exhibit 20?
It's simply an aerial view of 5210 Division Street and also the surrounding neighborhoods and businesses that encompass that area.
Okay. Let me take a seat for a moment, if I could, before we come back to this. Now, in this investigation, are we talking about a fixed location that the investigation focused on?
For the particular incident, yes. But there were several locations that were identified throughout the investigation that we also focused on.
Okay. What was that attributable to?
Different locations that the defendants visited.
Okay. And then who was identified as parties of interest early on in the investigation?
That would be Adriana Blake and Devon Braet.
Okay. What was Adriana Blake's maiden name?
Prieto,
Can you spell Prieto for our record?
Prieto.
The jury had heard the name of Adriana Prieto through the testimony of Tracy Screechfield. So is Adriana Prieto and Adriana Blake one and the same individual?
Yes, they are.
And what was the nature of the relationship between Adriana Blake and Devon Braet during the time frame of the homicide of Brian Goodwin, Amy Smith, and then the subsequent fire there at the residence?
At that time, they were boyfriend and girlfriend.
All right. Going back to State's Exhibit number, well, before I go there, Adriana Blake, did she have any transportation?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right. So by virtue of that, if she were to utilize a vehicle through the investigation, whose vehicles would she utilize?
She would primarily use Brian Goodwin's.
Okay. And did Brian Goodwin have multiple vehicles that were identified as belonging to him and actually were involved in this investigation?
Yes.
All right. Devon Braet, during the period in question, did he have a vehicle?
I believe he did, a white Chevy Impala, but it wasn't, I don't believe he used it during this particular time.
And was it having mechanical issues during this period of time?
I don't know that specifically, but it very well could have been.
Sure. At any rate, going back to State's Exhibit number 20 then, does this show Casey's from an aerial view?
Yes.
5210 North Division Street from an aerial view?
Yes, it does.
State Farm and Humbo's residence?
Yes.
And areas around those four locations?
Yes.
Would these areas around those locations have been locations that Devon Braet and Adriana Blake would have utilized to leave the area and come back to the area throughout January 15th and January 16th?
Yes. There are others, it's generally some of them, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to introduce State's Exhibit number 20.
Objection.
No objection.
Exhibit 20 is admitted.
May the state publish State's Exhibit 20?
You may.
All right. Detective Robinson, I'm going to trade out 73A and 73B. I'll have you put 20 up here on the easel, and then again have you come down and we'll engage in a discussion of this exhibit. Okay, now in looking at State's Exhibit 20, what are the major north-south streets that are depicted on this diagram? Starting from our far left, if you're standing looking at the exhibit, and moving to the right.
So you would have, from the left to right is North Division Street.
Okay, toward the top of the diagram, if you're, well, give us our directional indicators too, so that we know north, south, east, and west.
Well, it says it here on the map. There's north facing to the top,
Okay, south then would be what portion of the diagram?
the bottom of the diagram.
If you're looking at the diagram to your left, what direction would that be?
That is west,
And then if you're looking at the diagram to your right, what direction would that be?
east.
Okay, so if you're traveling north on Division Street at the very top of the diagram, which we don't see, eventually what would you run into? What would be our major interstate?
Interstate 80.
All right, okay, moving from left to right, what is our next north-south street on this diagram?
Would be Villa Drive, which runs north and south and right next to the Fairway grocery store.
And moving further to the right,
You would have Northwest Boulevard that runs north and south next to Public House Bar.
all right. What is the major east-west street on this diagram?
53rd Street.
Okay, now show us where 53rd Street is.
It's right here.
Can you point out Casey's so that the jury can see Casey's?
Sure. It's right here.
For a written record, what corner is it located at?
It's the southeast corner of 53rd and Division.
Point out 5210 North Division Street. Is there any writing that appears on the map so that the jury can identify what would be 5210 North Division?
Yes, it's diagrammed in green as 5210 North Division.
Where is State Farm located?
Just to the north of 5210 Division, and that's in red.
Okay, and then do we have any labeling for Hong Vo's residence?
Yes, we do. 1710 West 52nd Street, and that's also in green.
Okay. As video surveillance footage was collected in this investigation, will the defendant, Devon Braet and Adriana Blake, be identified as leaving 5210 North Division and traveling along paths of travel in this area?
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead and have you take your seat again. All right. Let's talk very generally of the varying investigative tools that were utilized in this investigation. First of all, were interviews conducted?
Many.
Okay. Were those of civilian witnesses?
Yes.
Beyond the interviews that were conducted of civilian witnesses, describe for the jury what are very standard components of investigations conducted by the Davenport Police Department in this day and age.
So we would do general canvasses, which is a neighborhood door-to-door canvas. If it's an apartment building, we would do an apartment building canvas, knocking on doors, asking people if they saw or heard anything suspicious, if you will, in the time frame that we're looking at. In addition to door-to-door canvases, we would also be doing video surveillance canvases. That includes commercial businesses as well as residential addresses.
And then let me stop you there. How common is it for individuals to have cameras affixed to their residences in this day and age?
Pretty common.
How common is it for businesses to have video surveillance footage affixed to their businesses? Does that circumstance provide law enforcement very valuable evidence?
Yes.
Was that true for this investigation?
A very large part of this investigation involves video surveillance review.
Okay. Was that video surveillance footage that was available simply isolated to the area of Casey's and 5210 North Division Street?
No, it encompasses
multiple locations within Davenport, in addition to other areas and also another state.
Sure, and we'll get to that. Now, beyond the canvassing and the looking for any type of video surveillance footage, what is another avenue that was pursued here?
So we utilize a lot of traffic camera footage, in addition to license plate reader technology that was used for this investigation. Cell phones. Cell phones are pretty huge and very used quite frequently in homicide, not just homicide investigations, in any investigation. Reviews of cell phones, not only the actual cell phone itself, but of cell phone records. Cell phone records reviews were done for this case as well.
Okay. Explain what you mean by a license plate reader camera.
Well, just would take a photograph of your license plate as you drive by a particular location within the city.
Okay. If you are looking for the movement of a particular vehicle, how would you utilize that license plate reader camera to identify locations a vehicle had traveled through?
So we have known locations in our city where these cameras are. I don't know them off the top of my head, but if you know the actual license plate, you can put the license plate in a search function, and it'll pull up every single camera that this particular vehicle has gone through. If you don't have a license plate, you can put identifying marks, a make, model of a vehicle, color of a vehicle, identifying characteristics such as stickers or dents or rust or anything like that. You can put that in a search function within our video camera system, or flock system, if you will, and get a multitude of searches or multitude of vehicles that way.
Between video surveillance footage from either residences, businesses, the license plate reader vehicles, or even the city cameras, did that produce a significant amount of evidence in this investigation?
Yeah.
All right. And then through the investigation, was that video surveillance footage such that it developed the movements and activities of Devon Braet and Adriana Blake over the time that we are looking at, from January 14th through January 18th?
There are small lapses in time, but generally speaking, absolutely.
All right. Now, I want to go back to the topic of cell phones. When citizens came in and were interviewed, the individuals that were interviewed, how would you describe them? Were they cooperative?
Very cooperative.
Okay. Were requests made to be able to download information from their cell phones?
Yes.
Were they willing to allow that to happen?
An overwhelming majority were. They would sign consent to search forms for their phones.
Okay. If you do have a physical cell phone, then what's the process that is followed at the Davenport Police Department to extract data from that cell phone?
So that phone, I would put in a request to our computer forensics unit to download those phones. I can't go into the technology of it because I'm not that smart. They'll explain that. But they simply would download the phone, put it onto a reader, and provide that reader program to the detective that made the request for them to review.
Okay. What types of data can you extract from a cell phone if you're giving the physical cell phone to submit to our digital forensic unit?
Pretty much anything that's on that phone, and some things that you probably didn't know were on your phone. We can get everything from communication content, that's call logs, the content of text messages. That also includes secondary text messages such as Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, things like that. We can get your complete browser history, all your media, and that's if you deleted material or not. Most of the technology that we have has the ability to recover deleted material. In addition to that, and I want to speak specifically to Apple technology, Apple's really good at providing location data, not so much with Androids, but with Apple, it gives us a pretty good information related to location information.
Okay, explain what you mean by location information.
Just GPS location of where a phone is at any one particular date and time.
Okay, for cell phones to operate, do they need cell towers in order to be able to function?
Not necessarily that I'm aware of. You can have Wi-Fi only.
Sure.
Connect to a Wi-Fi and make calls that way. I've never done that myself, but I know that is a way that can be used.
Okay. If a cell phone is connecting to a cell tower, then is that where we get that location information?
I believe so.
All right.
I'm not an expert on that, but I believe that's where it comes from.
All right. Now, is the jury going to hear a significant amount of evidence related to data extracted from cell phones?
Yes.
Okay. Who's that testimony going to come from?
Myself.
Okay. Is that going to take up a significant period of time?
Probably a couple of days.
All right. Another question that I wanted to talk with you about, very simply, obviously I'm older, and maybe the jurors being younger would understand this, but explain what you mean by browser history.
Your web history. So anything you search on the internet is what I'm talking about.
Okay. Now, if you aren't in possession of the actual physical phone to give to the digital forensic unit for purposes of an extraction, do you have the ability to be able to obtain data from phones that belong to specific individuals?
Yes, from the phone download itself.
No. All right. And I'll do a little bit better job.
You're talking about phone records.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Yes, so we do have that ability. Would be through a search warrant, be able to find out who the carrier is, and get information from cell phone companies themselves,
Okay.
specifically speaking to their records.
Okay. Is there some difference in what you can retrieve through data from a phone if you have physical possession of it and submit it to our digital forensic unit versus what you can get from the carrier through a request for cell phone records?
Yes, again, I am not the expert on this, so I'm going to speak very generally here. There'll be people that will testify that can give you more specific answers to this. But generally from the cell phone records themselves, we can provide that information to a detective who's trained in plotting and triangulating that out in relation to different cell towers.
Okay. If you ask for records from the cell phone provider, do they keep text messages like what we would get from a physical extraction?
They used to. That's becoming less and less frequent as technology gets better. It's more the exception now as opposed to the rule. I was able to get a little bit of text message content information from a cell records request for this, but for only one person.
Okay. During the investigation, were officers interested in the cell phone of Amy Smith?
Absolutely.
How many phones were identified as belonging to Brian Goodwin?
2.
Were officers interested in locating the cell phones of Brian Goodwin?
Yes.
Were officers interested in locating the cell phones of Adriana Blake,
Yes.
or cell phone? Were officers interested in locating the cell phone of Devon Braet?
Yes.
Were any of those phones able to be located through the course of the investigation?
We didn't locate the actual physical phone for Devon, Adriana, Amy, or Brian.
Okay. And so in that instance, what steps did you take to collect any type of data that the cell phone providers would have for those phones?
That's when we would do it anyway, but we would rely primarily on the records request that was, that a search warrant was sent for, that we requested the records.
Okay. Did this investigation also present another avenue that provided very beneficial evidence?
Yes.
Explain.
Adriana Blake at the time was wearing a GPS ankle monitor, so that was utilized for this investigation as well.
Was she on probation?
She was.
Okay. Define what you mean by a GPS monitoring device or an ankle monitor.
It's a bracelet that's worn around your ankle that plots your movements on any particular date and time.
Okay, and through January 14th, 15th, and 16th, were Devon Braet and Adriana Blake identified as being together?
Yes.
Okay. Were their GPS coordinates that were obtained that helped to show the various locations that they went to throughout January 15th in particular?
Yes, specifically related to the ankle monitor, yes, but some point during the middle portion of the day of the 15th, that ability no longer existed. The bracelet was either lost battery or eventually was cut off.
All right. All right, now, what other state are we going to be talking about?
Illinois.
Explain.
Illinois was the state that we knew Devon and Adriana fleed to following the murders of Brian and Amy.
Okay, and was it directly after the murders or after the fire call?
It was after the fire.
Okay, and then how did law enforcement know that they fled to the state of Illinois?
Cell phone technology in addition to vehicle cameras and license plate reader technology.
Okay, were they captured on a city camera leaving the state of Iowa?
Yes.
Okay, and then through the investigation, was a determination made where they had fled to?
Yes, they went to the Galesburg, Illinois area.
Okay, and then what existed to provide that information, or what was available that provided that information to law enforcement where they could put Adriana Blake and Devon Braet in the Galesburg area after the fire call on January 16th?
I believe that was cell phone technology. There was I believe we had a ping up at that particular time. The phones were pinging in that area. In addition to that, we sent a contingent of detectives to the Galesburg area and located a large amount of video surveillance that proved they were also in that area.
Okay. Are there video surveillance cameras that are affixed along highways?
Yes.
Okay. Through what entity?
The Department of Transportation. For this investigation, we utilized the Illinois Department of Transportation for that.
Okay. Is there, outside of the Galesburg area, is there going to be another location that we'll be talking about throughout this trial?
Yes.
Explain.
There's a rest stop between here and Galesburg where the vehicle that Adriana and Devon were utilizing broke down, and we have video from that particular location in addition to evidence that we collected.
Okay, all right. One final issue for this round of testimony. I want to introduce the names of the parties and the vehicles and the various addresses that we're going to talk about, since there's quite a bit, and then the jury can see this and you can associate names with addresses for us, okay?
Okay.
Is there an exhibit that's been prepared to lay out those names, the various addresses, and the various vehicles we're going to be talking about?
Yes.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that I'm showing counsel what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 90.
90.
90.
Thank you.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. Detective Robinson, are you familiar with State's Exhibit number 90?
I am.
How are you familiar with State's Exhibit number 90?
It's just a diagram, if you will, of the witnesses involved in this case, in addition to the varying locations that are important to this investigation, as well as the numerous amount of vehicles.
Okay, come on down from the witness stand. We'll get this put up. Your Honor, the State would move to introduce State's Exhibit number 90.
Objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 90 is admitted.
May we publish?
You may.
Okay, all right, Detective Robinson, if you want to get your physical placement. Okay, you're going to stay right there, right? Okay.
I don't know if I could fit if I didn't have it.
Yeah, I tell you. This one's a little Large. Okay, all right. Here we go. All right, let me get my glasses on too so I can see what's going on as we talk about
Again,
this.
and members of the jury, if you need to move so you can see these exhibits, just do it. And counsel, same thing, if you need to come around.
Thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
All right, now let's go to the left side of this exhibit. At the top of the exhibit, what is the first address that is noted?
5210 North Division Street.
In association with 5210 North Division Street, does this exhibit identify the parties that the jury will hear about associated with that residence as people testify?
Yes.
Okay, if you could list those names, identify their role so that we have a perspective.
So again, we have Brian Goodwin and Amy Smith, who are our homicide subjects that were living there. And we also have Adriana Blake and Devon Braet, who are the two defendants in this case, and the roommates to Brian and Amy. There's another name on there. His name is Jonathan Parrish. He was identified as a person who was living there, but had moved out. I don't know the exact day, but a week or two prior to this incident taking place. He, after moving out, left behind a dog that he had plans to return to pick up. And that becomes a little relevant in this investigation as well.
And what is the name of the dog that the jury will be hearing testimony about?
His name was Kilo.
Okay, what relationship did Devon Braet and Adriana Blake have with one another during this period of time?
They were boyfriend and girlfriend.
All right, now are there going to be family members of Brian Goodwin who will be testifying?
Yes.
Are there also going to be friends and or associates of Brian Goodwin who will be testifying?
Yes.
Take us to our second category.
Would be involved family members / witnesses of Brian Goodwin. And we have Sarah Goodwin, who is his legal wife,
Okay,
and then Caleb Goodwin, who is his son.
okay. Were Sarah and Brian living together at this time?
They were not.
Okay. Were they on good terms?
Yes,
Were they living in separate residences?
they were.
Give us our third category.
That would be involved witness / girlfriend of Brian Goodwin. And she was identified as Victoria Smeaton, who lives at 4736 West 12th Street here in Davenport.
Okay. Is there a nickname that the parties associated with Brian utilized for Victoria?
I believe Tori.
Okay, so if the jury hears the name Tori, is that Victoria Smeaton?
Yes.
All right, take us to our fourth category.
We have associates of Brian Goodwin who were looking for him on January 15, 2024. Those names are Richard Dean. People refer to him as Dickie. And then Amber LaBarge.
What is Richard's association with Brian Goodwin?
A friend.
What is Amber LaBarge's association with Brian Goodwin?
A friend, but also she is the mother to Caleb.
All right. Give us our fifth category on the left side of the diagram.
That would be the bus driver who witnessed events at 5210 North Division Street during the early morning hours of January 15th and January 16th, 2024.
What is her name?
Cheryl Hagman.
Who was she working for during this period of time?
I believe her Riverbend Transit.
Sure. All right, then what is our sixth category on the left side of the diagram?
Witness / uncle of Adriana Blake. He was identified as Kevin Morgan, who lived at 223 East 35th Street, apartment D as in David.
Give the jury a perspective of where that address is located.
Obviously on 35th Street. If you're familiar with Davenport at all, it's directly behind Filling Station Restaurant.
All right. Do they lie on the same side of the street?
They do, south side of 35th Street.
And then our seventh category on the left side of the diagram, what do we have?
Witness / associates of Adriana Blake at 1604 Arlington Avenue, apartment number 4.
How many individuals are we talking about?
3.
Identify them and what their relationship was to one another.
Sure. So the two individuals that were actually residing there were Alexandria Scriver, who was an associate of Adriana's, and then her boyfriend, who was identified as Nicholas
Spell it for our written record.
Blazezik, CZYK. And he, again, is the boyfriend of Alexandria.
Who's the third party?
His name is Joseph Ellis. He is a friend of Nicholas's and was actually at 1604 Arlington Avenue as well, although he did not live there.
Okay, all right. Now, all of these individuals that have been listed, will they be testifying?
With the exception of Jonathan Parrish.
Sure. And then for a number of these individuals that were associated with either Adriana Blake and Devon Braet, would they have had contact with them throughout the day of January 15th? And, yeah, January 15th.
I believe a majority of them did, with the exception of the residents at 1604 Arlington. Prior to, they had contact with him on the evening of January 15th, however.
Okay, okay. And are we talking about both Adriana and Devon?
Yes.
Okay, now let's go to the right side of our diagram. What's our first category on the right side of our diagram?
Would be locations / individuals visited by Adriana Blake and Devon Braet following the homicide of Brian Goodwin and Amy Smith.
Okay. The jury's going to hear the specifics, but generally, what date and time is it believed, based on evidence that was recovered, that Amy Smith was murdered and then Brian Goodwin was murdered?
We believe it to be sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning for Miss Smith, and then sometime shortly after 4:30 in the morning for Mr. Goodwin. Again, both on the early morning hours of Monday, January 15th, 2024.
Okay, so following the homicide of those individuals, what locations and individuals did Adriana Blake and Devon Braet have contact with, and what addresses?
So first would be Adriana's uncle, Kevin, who lives at 223 East 35th Apartment D. Then Becky Almazi, who is Mr. Braet's mother. She lives at 512 East High Street. They meet up with Daniel Heinrichs, but not at a residence. Following that, Brianna Tarkington becomes important. She was an associate of Miss Blake's, and at this particular time, she was residing at the Motel 6 at 101 West 65th Street, which is up by Menards.
Okay.
Then obviously we spoke about Nicholas Lazazik and Alexandria Scriber, who live at 1604 Arlington, number 4.
Our second category on the right side of the diagram, describe that.
Associates of Adriana Blake, who she communicated with during the events of January 15th through January 18th of 2024.
And who were those individuals?
That is Melissa Weber and Daniel Heinrichs.
All right. Our third category?
Would be individual directed by Melissa Weber to pick up Adriana Blake and Devon Braet at the Cristala Baca rest stop in Woodhull, Illinois on January 18th, 2024. And she was identified as Diane Hepler.
Okay. And was this after the vehicle that they left Iowa in had broken down?
Yes.
Okay. Then our fourth category?
The associate of Melissa Weber, who provided a ride to Adriana and Devon after their arrival in Davenport on January 18th, 2024, to the Quick Star on 65th Street, which is essentially directly across the street from the Motel 6.
Okay. All right. Now, how's Quick spelled on that diagram?
Quick.
Is that incorrect?
It is.
And what do we mean by Quick Star?
It's spelled Kwik, I believe.
And where is that located at?
Again, directly across the street from the Motel 6.
Okay. And what other major business is it located by?
Menards is up there.
Okay.
The Quick Star would be just to the south of that.
And what's the name of the individual that the jury will hear from?
His name is DeAndre Bryan.
And then finally, our last category.
These are the various vehicles that were involved in this investigation. The first one and primary vehicle we'll be talking about throughout is a white and black Dodge Nitro that belonged to Brian Goodwin. We also have a black Nissan Xterra that belonged to Brian Goodwin. And if you refer back to that Google Maps image, both of these vehicles are in that photograph. We also have a Toyota Celica that also belonged to Brian Goodwin. Those were the 3 vehicles that belonged to Mr. Goodwin.
Okay. After the murders of Brian Goodwin and Amy Smith, who was operating the black and white Dodge Nitro?
Devon and Adriana.
Okay. During the sequence of events of January 14th and 15th, who was in possession of Nissan Xterra?
That would have been Richard Dickey Dean and Amber LaBarge. I believe actually Richard was the one that was the primary operator of that car, however.
It would sound like who actually was the individual that utilized that vehicle?
The person who drove that car was his son, Caleb. There was some mechanical issues with the nitro, and Brian had took possession of it for a period of time so he could get around town in.
Sure. All right, then after that, our last three vehicles. What's the next vehicle, number 4?
We have a black Honda Accord that was obtained by Devon and Adriana behind 223 East 35th Street, which again is the address of her uncle.
Okay. Was that the vehicle that they used to flee into the state of Illinois?
Yes.
All right. Our 5th vehicle?
Would be a white Ford Explorer that belongs to DeAndre Bryant.
Okay.
And then we have a gold Toyota Camry that belongs to Alexandria Scriver.
So is that all of the vehicles that are in play?
Yes.
All right. Go ahead and take your seat. I have no further questions, Your Honor, for Detective Robinson at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination, and do you want that exhibit left on?
No, that's okay. Yes,
Do you want to take a break?
Okay, absolutely.
well, it's up to the court.
Yeah, let's do that. It's 5 till.